The fluorescent lights of the Costco hummed over my head as I double-checked the long receipt against my notepad. It was just a habit. I've always managed the family books. My son, Alex, let out a long, impatient sigh behind me. But it was my daughter-in-law, Chloe, who finally snapped. She ripped the foot-long receipt right out of my hand. "Oh my God, stop," she hissed, her voice low and sharp. "You're not the family bookkeeper anymore. You're just a dependent. It's embarrassing." Her words hit me harder than a slap. A dependent, after everything I'd built for them. But that explosion at the checkout was just the final crack in a foundation that had been crumbling for years. To understand how we reached that breaking point, we need to go back 3 months, to my 60th birthday. My 60th birthday started with a mimosa. That, in itself, was a red flag. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, was nice. Cloyingly nice, her voice a full octave higher than usual. "Happy birthday, Mom," she chirped, handing me the glass of cheap champagne and orange juice. My son, Alex, just hovered by the patio door, wringing his hands, looking like a kid who was about to be busted for throwing a baseball through a window. He couldn't meet my eye. "We have a huge surprise for you, Margaret," Chloe said, looping her arm through mine. She always used my first name, Margaret, when she was about to ask for something, or when she was about to do something I wouldn't like. It was Mom when she wanted to look good in public. "It's in the backyard," Alex mumbled, finally speaking. I let her lead me out, my heart sinking a little. The morning was bright, a typical cloudless California day. And there, on the patch of grass where my prized rose bushes used to be the ones my late husband Mark had planted for me, was a box. It wasn't a house. It was one of those trendy 200-square-foot accessory dwelling units. A glorified shed, painted a sad, flat gray to match the main house, and it still smelled of fresh paint and particle board. A tiny, sad-looking welcome mat was already on the doorstep. Ta-da! Chloe spread her arms, her bracelets jangling. "Now you have your own space, Mom, your own little private cottage. It's got its own plumbing," Alex added quickly, staring at the concrete, "and a hot plate, state-of-the-art. My own space." I looked back at the main house. My house. The one Mark and I had bought 30 years ago with every penny we had. The one I'd signed over to Alex in a fit of grief and misplaced trust after Mark died, thinking, it's all for the family. My world had shrunk to the size of a walk-in closet, but my duties, it seemed, had expanded. The following weekend, Alex and Chloe hosted one of their networking barbecues. My tiny home's one window faced the patio, so I had a front row seat to the performance. Chloe, in a white linen dress, drifted through clusters of people I didn't know, all holding craft beers and laughing too loudly. My son Alex was manning the grill, a massive stainless steel contraption he'd bought with money I knew he didn't have. A high-pitched voice. "Alex, honey, we're out of ice." Alex looked up, flustered, his face pink from the propane heat. His eyes scanned the yard and landed on my window. On me. He gave a short, sharp little "come here" motion with his head. I felt that old, familiar pull, the need to be useful, the need to fix things for him. I smoothed down my blouse, walked out, and the noise of the party hit me like a wave. "Hey, Mom," Alex said, not even turning around. "Can you grab more ice from the main house kitchen and see if Chloe needs anything?" The main house. It wasn't our house anymore. It was the house. For the next hour, I was a ghost in a polo shirt. I refilled chip bowls. I fetched ketchup. I shuttled bags of ice from the freezer in the main house garage, my feet treading the path between my tiny prison and the life I used to own. No one spoke to me, except to ask where the bathroom was. I was the invisible help. I was on the patio, picking up empty bottles when I heard Chloe's laugh. She was sitting on a new wicker couch with 2 other women, her back to me. "God, Chloe, your skin looks amazing," one of them said. "It's because I'm finally stress-free," Chloe said, taking a loud sip of her white wine. "We finally solved our mother-in-law problem." "Oh no, what did you do? Stick her in a home?" "Better," Chloe laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "We put her out to pasture in the backyard ADU. It's perfect. She gets fresh air, I get my guest room back, and Alex finally has his home office space. Everybody wins. Out to pasture, like an old, useless horse." I stood there, holding a sticky, empty bottle of Corona. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just listened to them laugh. That night, the laughter and the music from the main house kept me awake. The walls of my tiny home were thin. I could hear their voices, their music. They were so close, and I had never felt more alone. The whole place smelled of cheap particle board and the glue they used for the vinyl flooring. It was the smell of a place built to be temporary, to be disposable, just like me. I got up from the narrow cot they called a daybed and went to the small stack of cardboard boxes in the corner. These were the only things they'd allowed me to keep. Everything else, Mark's armchair, my old dining table, 30 years of memories had been donated to make space. I pulled open the flaps of a box marked Mark Office, and there it was. My breath caught in my throat. It was a thick, leather-bound accounts ledger. The cover was worn, the gold embossing so faded you could barely read it. Gallo & Sons Construction. This they didn't throw away. They didn't even know what it was. To them, it was just an old, empty book. I ran my fingers over the cracked leather. It was my real life. I sat on the cold vinyl floor, under the single glaring light bulb, and opened it. Suddenly, I wasn't in the shed. I was back in 1993, at our old kitchen table. Mark, my Mark, was covered in drywall dust, smelling of sweat and coffee. He had his head in his hands. "We're going to lose it, Marge," he'd whispered, his voice thick. "The payroll, the suppliers. I can't make the numbers work." I remembered I just poured him another coffee, pushed his tangled receipts aside, and pulled out this ledger. "You swing the hammer, Mark," I told him, my voice firm. "I'll make the numbers work." And I did. I spent all night cross-referencing invoices, calling suppliers, moving money. By 3 a.m., I had found a way. I had saved us. Mark had looked at me, his eyes full of an awe I hadn't seen in years. "You're the real brains, Marge," he said, kissing my head. "I swear, you're the one who built this business, not me." I closed my eyes, the memory washing over me, so sharp it hurt. He saw me. My husband saw me. Chloe and Alex. They saw a dependent. They saw an old woman who couldn't work a debit machine at Costco. They had no idea who I was. They had forgotten that I was the one who balanced the books for a 20-person construction crew for 2 decades. I was the one who negotiated with banks. I was the one who knew where every single penny was buried. They had put me out to pasture. They thought I was a harmless old sheep. I opened the ledger again. My fingers, stiff with a little arthritis, traced the neat columns I had drawn by hand. They had made a terrible mistake. They hadn't just given me a tiny home. They had given me a headquarters. And they had just left me alone with the one thing that held all their secrets. My new life in 200 square feet meant I got to know the backyard real well. I learned the sound of the neighbor's dog, the exact minute the sprinklers hissed on at 5 a.m., and the way the thin walls did nothing to block the noise from the main house. I had a front row seat, and a week after I'd been upgraded, it was a performance. Alex and Chloe were hosting one of their networking BBQs. My tiny home's one window faced the patio, so I watched them set up. Chloe, in a white linen dress that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check, was directing Alex, who was fumbling with a massive stainless steel grill, a new purchase, I noted. I planned to stay inside. I'd make do with my hot plate and a can of soup. I was independent, after all. That was the whole point. But then, my son's voice cut through the party noise. "Mom? Hey, Mom." I opened the door a crack. The smell of lighter fluid and expensive meat hit me. The patio was full of people I didn't know, all holding craft beers, all looking young and loud and shiny. Alex saw me and waved me over, his face flushed from the propane heat. "Hey," he said, his voice low, as if he was embarrassed. "Listen, we're running low on ice. Could you grab a bag from the freezer in the main house garage?" My house, my garage, my freezer. "And," he added, before I could answer, "Chloe needs the other chip bowl from the pantry." I felt that old, familiar tug, the need to be useful, the need to make things smooth for him. "Of course," I said. For the next hour, I was a ghost in a polo shirt. I shuttled ice bags from the garage, the plastic digging into my fingers. I refilled chip bowls. I located the good ketchup Chloe had hidden in the back of the pantry. I was a shadow moving through the edges of their bright, loud life. No one spoke to me, except for one young man who handed me his empty plate and said, "Thanks," without even looking at me, assuming I was the hired help. I suppose in a way I was. I was the unpaid live-in help, conveniently stored in the backyard. I was carrying a tray of empty beer bottles back to the recycling bin when I heard Chloe's laugh. It was a sharp, tinkling sound, the kind she used when she was trying to impress someone. She was on the new wicker patio furniture, surrounded by two other women who looked just like her, all highlights in athleisure. My back was to them, but sound travels. "God, Chloe, your skin looks amazing," one of them said. "It's because I'm finally stress-free," Chloe replied, and I heard the clink of her wine glass. "We finally solved our little mother-in-law problem." I froze. My hand was gripping a sticky, empty bottle of Corona. "Oh no," the other woman said, her voice dropping. "Don't tell me. What did you do, stick her in a home?" "Better," Chloe laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "We put her out to pasture in the backyard. Alex's dad left him the house, but she was just there, in the guest room. So we built her a tiny home. It's perfect." "A tiny home?" She gets her independence, and I get my guest room back for my Peloton. Plus, Alex finally has a home office space. Everybody wins. Out to pasture, like an old, useless horse, like a cow that stopped giving milk. I stood there for a long time, listening to the buzzing of a fly that was circling the empty bottle in my hand. I felt cold. The hot, humid air of the BBQ suddenly felt arctic. I didn't turn around. I didn't say a word. I just walked, my steps quiet on the grass. I put the recycling in the bin, went back to my tiny home and locked the door. I could still hear their music, their laughter, but it sounded very, very far away. The click of the tiny lock on my door was barely audible over the sound of their party, but to me, it was as loud as a gunshot. I stood there in the dark, my back pressed against the cheap, thin door. I could hear everything, the thumping bass of their music, the high, sharp sound of Chloe's laughter, the deeper, jovial tones of my son, Alex, playing the perfect host. Out to pasture. The words echoed in the 200-square-foot silence. A problem. I looked around my new home. The air was thick with the chemical smell of particle board and fresh paint, a smell that was supposed to mean new, but just felt cheap. It was the smell of a place built to be disposable. It was the smell of my pasture. How had this happened? It's a question a lot of women my age ask, I suppose. You pour your entire life into a family, into a home, into a man, into a child. You are the glue, the planner, the bookkeeper, the nurse, the chef. You are the foundation, the load-bearing wall that holds everything up, and you do it so quietly, for so long, that they forget you're even there. And then one day, they decide to remodel. They see the foundation as old, and they'd rather have a new coat of paint. I felt a coldness creep into my bones that had nothing to do with the night air. It was a hollow, empty feeling, the feeling of being erased, a dependent. The word was so ugly. It was a word for someone who couldn't stand on their own. And I had always been the one holding everyone else up. My eyes fell on the corner of the room. The party, the music, the laughter, it all faded. In that corner sat the 4 cardboard boxes that held the entire remainder of my 60-year-old life. They were stacked neatly, because I am a neat person. My handwriting, still a perfect, clear cursive, was on the side of each one. Kitchen, essentials, linens, photos, 1,980 to 2010. And the last one, Mark, office. This one was different. It was still sealed with heavy-duty packing tape. I hadn't been able to bring myself to open it. Not since Alex had helped me pack, which really meant he stood there looking at his phone while I sorted through 30 years of marriage, deciding what was essential and what would be donated. Donated. Another ugly word. I walked over to the stack and knelt on the cold vinyl floor. My knees cracked in protest. I looked at the label, Mark, office. I ran my fingers over the tape. I was here, in this box, because of what Chloe and Alex thought of me. They saw me as a sweet, slightly senile old woman who balanced her checkbook to the penny and clipped coupons. They saw me as a relic, a burden they were now generously housing in the backyard. They had no idea who I was. They had forgotten who I had always been. With a determination that surprised me, I dug my fingernail under the edge of the tape and ripped it open. The sound was abrasive in the small room. The smell of old paper, dust, and something that was purely Mark, a faint scent of coffee and sawdust, wafted up to me. Inside, it was just old office supplies, dried-up pens, a heavy-duty stapler that probably didn't have any staples, a Rolodex. And under all of it, at the very bottom, was the one thing I had been looking for, even if I didn't know it. It was a thick, leather-bound accounts ledger. The dark green leather was cracked, and the gold-embossed title was so faded you could barely read it. Gallo and Sons Construction. I pulled it out. The sheer weight of it felt good in my hands. It was heavy. It had substance. It was real, unlike the particle board walls around me. I sat on the floor, opened the cover, and I wasn't in the tiny home anymore. The smell of old paper and ink transported me. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in 1995. I was at our old kitchen table, the one Alex and Chloe had donated last month. The table was covered, absolutely buried, in a sea of paper. Invoices, late notices with their red screaming envelopes, payroll stubs, legal pads covered in my own frantic calculations. And my husband Mark was sitting across from me, his head in his hands. He was a big man, strong. He could frame a house in a week, but he was broken. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath and the sawdust in his hair. "It's over, Marge," he whispered, his voice thick. He wouldn't look at me. "It's done. The bank's calling the note on the truck. Payroll is Friday, and I can't cover it. I'm short. We're going to lose the house, Marge. After all this." I remember I didn't say anything. I just got up, went to the Mr. Coffee, and poured the last 2 cups. I put one in front of him. I sat back down. Then I pulled out this exact ledger. "Okay," I said, my voice calm. "Give me the bank statement. And the invoice from Gallo Construction." "No, not that one. The one from last month. The one for the backhoe." He just stared at me, blankly. "Marge, what's the point? It's over." "You swing the hammer, Mark," I said, pulling the papers toward me. "I'll keep the books." And I worked. For hours. The house was dead silent except for the sound of my pencil scratching on a legal pad and the soft shush of invoices as I sorted them into piles. My mind was a steel trap. I knew every number. I knew every deal. And then I found it. "Mark. Mark, wake up." I shook his shoulder. "Look at this." I pointed to a line item. "Gallo double-billed us. They charged us for the backhoe rental twice. And you," I said, pulling out a supplier sheet. "You paid the lumberyard on a 30-day net, but I told them we needed 90. It's in the contract." The sun was starting to come up, painting the kitchen in a pale gray light. Mark was asleep in his chair, snoring softly, and I had a new sheet of paper in front of me, a clean one. On it was a list. When he finally woke up, I just pushed the paper and a fresh cup of coffee toward him. He looked at the list. He looked at the stacks of paid and to call. He looked at me. His eyes, so full of despair just hours before, were now full of an awe that made my heart ache. "My God, Marge," he'd whispered. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "You did it. You saved us." "We're tight," I said, "but we're not broke." He shook his head, a little laugh escaping him. "You're the real brains, Margaret. I swear to God, I just swing the hammer. You built this. All of it." I blinked, and the memory was gone. I was back in the cold, gray particle board box, the heavy ledger resting in my lap. The party was still going, louder now. Someone had put on a song I didn't recognize. "You're the real brains. You're just a dependent." The 2 phrases warred in my head. They thought I was a burden. They thought I was a sweet, old, harmless woman to be put out to pasture. They had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten that I was the one who saved the house they were currently in, drinking wine and laughing, while I sat in the backyard. The cold, hollow feeling inside me was gone. It was replaced by something else. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. It was the 3 a.m., back against the wall. I will make the numbers work. Part of me. The part of me that had been dormant for too long. I ran my hand over the worn leather cover of the ledger. They hadn't just put me in a pasture. They had locked me in a room with my weapon, and they had just reminded me how to use it. For a week, I kept that ledger under the thin mattress of my cot. It was a physical reminder, a solid weight in a life that had suddenly become thin and cheap. I was no longer a ghost. I was an observer, I was waiting, though I didn't know for what. Then, one rainy Tuesday, it came. A sharp, frantic knock on my tiny home's door. Not Alex. He never knocked. He'd just call from the patio, or worse, just open the door. It was Chloe. She was standing in the drizzle, no umbrella, her expensive hair plastered to her face, a look of pure, theatrical panic in her eyes. Alex was just behind her on the grass, looking pale and sick. "Margaret, thank God," Chloe said, pushing past me into the tiny room, bringing the smell of rain and expensive perfume with her. "We have a problem, a huge problem." I just stood there, holding the door, letting the cool, damp air wash over me. I waited. "It's the house," Alex said, his voice cracking. He was wringing his hands, just like he did on my birthday. "The foundation. It's cracked. A cracked foundation." I almost smiled. The metaphor was so perfect, so complete, it was almost lazy. The whole family was a cracked foundation, but I just let my face fall into the expected lines of worry. "Oh no, are you sure? Are we sure?" Chloe's voice was a half octave from a shriek. "Of course we're sure. We had an inspector out. He said it's bad, Margaret. Like, house is unlivable in a year bad." They crowded into the tiny space, and my 200 square feet suddenly felt like a coffin. Alex paced the 2 steps he could take in either direction. Chloe, however, was all business. She dumped a thick, glossy folder onto my tiny dinette table. The folder landed with a heavy thud right next to my ledger. My book, my weapon. It was sitting right there, in plain sight, and they didn't even see it. It was, to them, just an old dusty prop for the old dusty woman. "What's this?" I asked, gesturing to the folder. "It's the solution," Chloe said, flipping open the cover. It was a stack of official-looking papers, full of dense black text. "We have to fix it. Immediately. And the only way to get that kind of cash, fast, is a HELOC. A home equity line of credit." She said the word HELOC, like it was a magic wand, a simple, everyday tool. I knew what it was. It was a second mortgage. It was debt. It was borrowing against the life Mark and I had built, penny by penny. "It's just a repair loan," Alex said quickly, seeing the look on my face. "We pay for the foundation, and that's it. It's simple." "And," Chloe said, tapping the top page, "here's the thing." She looked at me, her eyes wide and sincere. I felt like I was watching a bad cable TV movie. "The house is still, you know." She waved her hand vaguely. "In your name, from when you and Mark first bought it." "Technically," Alex muttered. "So," Chloe finished, her voice all sweet reason, "you have to be the one to sign." And there it was. The hook. The punchline. For the past 2 months, I was a dependent. I was a burden. I was a problem to be solved. But now, faced with a stack of bank papers, I was suddenly the responsible, legal owner. My house, my signature. The old me, the mom me, would have signed without reading, just to fix my son's panic. But that woman was gone. The woman out to pasture was still there, and she had questions. I slowly reached for my reading glasses, which I kept in my pocket. I put them on, the tiny click of the hinges loud in the silence. I pulled the folder toward me. "A HELOC," I said, my voice quiet. "Who's the lender?" "First National Trust." I read the name off the top. "What's the interest rate? Is it fixed or variable?" Chloe stared at me. Alex's mouth fell open a little. "This was not in their script." I don't know," Alex stammered. "The officer said it was a good rate." "And the inspector's report," I said, turning a page. "I don't see it in here. Just the loan application. I'd like to see the report. I was the bookkeeper. I always saw the reports." Chloe's patience, which was always a very shallow, very brittle thing, evaporated. "Margaret," she snapped, her voice like ice. "This is not the time to play accountant. This is an emergency. We don't have time to shop around for rates." I looked at my son, Alex. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He was looking at his shoes, which were tracking mud onto my floor. "Mom, just, please, don't be difficult," the inspector said. He said the whole west side of the house could collapse. He finally looked at me, his eyes wide with a fear that was for the first time actually genuine. "Do you want us to be homeless?" he whispered. "Do you want to be homeless? This tiny house won't be much good if the main one falls on it. The threat hung in the air, as thick and damp as the rain outside. Sign, or you'll lose even this. I looked at the pen Chloe was holding out. Then I looked at the glossy papers. My hands were steady, my old, wrinkled, dependent hands. I took the pen. Where do I sign? Relief washed over Alex's face so fast he almost sagged. Chloe pointed, her manicured nail tapping the paper. Here, an initial here. I signed. Margaret L. Henderson. With every loop of my cursive, I felt a piece of my old life, the one Mark and I built, draining away. I was signing away our equity, our safety, our future, all for a lie. I knew it was a lie. A cracked foundation. Please. But as my hand moved, my eyes were sharp. My brain was not signing. My brain was memorizing. First National Trust. The lender. The logo was on every single page. Michael Jenks, loan officer. His name was printed clearly on the business card stapled to the cover sheet. Account number 788B. I signed the last page. I set the pen down. I said the information over and over in my head, setting it to the tune of an old nursery rhyme. The way I used to memorize supplier codes. 788B. Mr. Jenks. FNT. Great, Chloe chirped, snatching the folder back before the ink was even dry. See? Painless. They were gone in 30 seconds. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the sudden, deafening quiet. The pen was still on the table. They were probably already in their car, driving to the bank, laughing, celebrating. I sat there for a long time. They thought they had won. They thought they had just pulled off the perfect scam, manipulating the senile old woman in the backyard. I reached out and touched the worn leather cover of my ledger. A cracked foundation, I whispered to the empty particle board room. You have no idea. A cracked foundation doesn't get fixed overnight, apparently. For 2 weeks after I signed those papers, nothing happened. No construction crews, no sound of jackhammers, no trucks dumping concrete. The only new thing in the backyard was a top-of-the-line, stainless steel smoker, another one that Alex had wheeled onto the patio. I went on with my new, shrunken life. I swept my tiny floor. I read my library books. I waited. And then, on the first Tuesday of the month, I ran out of my blood pressure medication. It was a routine I'd had for 10 years. I'd walk the half-mile to the CVS, pick up my prescription, and pay for it with the supplementary debit card Alex had set up for me. The one linked to the main household account, the one my Social Security and my small widow's pension were deposited into, like clockwork. The CVS was bright and cold, smelling of stale candy and magazine perfume. There was a line. A young mother with a crying baby was in front of me, and a teenage boy tapping his foot was behind me. The usual, everyday slice of American life. I finally got to the counter. Margaret Henderson, the young pharmacist asked, not looking up. Yes, that's me. She slid the little white paper bag toward me. I slid my card into the reader. We both waited for the beep. Instead, the machine made a sad, dull bonk. The screen flashed a bright, angry red. Declined. The pharmacist, who couldn't have been more than 20, looked up, her eyes wide. Oh, I said, my face instantly hot. That's strange. Can you try it again? She did. I swiped. Bonk. Declined. The heat in my neck was prickling. The baby behind me was now screaming. The boy's foot tapping was getting louder. Ma'am, the pharmacist whispered, leaning in, her face a mask of professional pity. It's not going through, do you? Have another way to pay? A dependent. The word from Costco echoed in my head. I was not a dependent. I was a woman with a pension. I was a woman who had, just this morning, balanced her own tiny checkbook. My hands trembled as I dug into my purse, past the useless family card for my real wallet. The one with my own bank debit card, linked to the small pension account I'd kept separate, the one Chloe didn't know about. The one I called my rainy day fund. It was apparently raining. I paid. The transaction went through in a silent green instant. I grabbed the bag, mumbled a "thank you," and walked out, my humiliation trailing behind me like a shadow. The walk home was different. The sun was still shining, but all I felt was a cold, simmering rage. It wasn't an accident. A bank error doesn't just happen on the one card that links me to them. This was different. This was intentional. Or, just as bad, it was the kind of careless collateral damage that comes from a much bigger explosion. Where did the HELOC money go? The money I signed for, the money that was supposed to be for the cracked foundation. When I got back, I didn't go to my tiny home. I walked straight up the patio steps and, without knocking, opened the sliding glass door to the main house. Chloe was in the kitchen, which was, I noted, not being remodeled. She was sitting at the new granite island on a new, high-tech stool, scrolling through a brand-new, oversized tablet. "The card was declined," I said. My voice was flat. It didn't tremble. Chloe didn't look up. "What card?" "The supplementary card, at the pharmacy, for my prescription." She sighed, a long, exasperated sound, and kept scrolling. "So? It's a bank error. It happens." "Chloe, that account has my pension deposited into it every month. There is plenty of money in that account. I just paid for my own medicine from my personal savings." That got her to look up. Her eyes were hard. "Margaret," she said, as if she were speaking to a very, very stupid child. "We're busy. Alex is dealing with all the loan stuff. It's complicated. Wires get crossed." "The loan we got for the foundation?" I asked. "Obviously," she snapped. "Things are just tight right now, until the contractors are paid." She looked back down at her tablet. The conversation, as far as she was concerned, was over. "So what am I supposed to do?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She shrugged, still scrolling. "Just use your tiny pension for now, okay? For your little things. We'll sort out the account later." Your tiny pension, your little things. I stood there for a full 10 seconds just watching the top of her highlighted hair. She didn't move. She didn't care. I was dismissed. I turned, and in the reflection of the glass door, I saw her, and I saw myself. A dependent, a burden, an old woman with a tiny pension who was in the way. I walked back down the patio steps. I went to my tiny home. I clicked the lock. I sat on my cot, the CVS receipt still crumpled in my hand. "Just use your tiny pension." I took a deep, steadying breath. I reached under my cot and pulled out the heavy, leather-bound ledger. "A bank error. Wires get crossed. Complicated." These were the words people used when they were lying. They were the words Mark used to use before I took over the books. I opened the ledger. I put my crumpled CVS receipt on one page. On the other, I took out a pen from my purse. I smoothed out the pharmacy receipt. And, from memory, I wrote down 3 things on a clean new line. First National Trust, Michael Jenks, Loan Officer, Act 788B. Chloe was right. It was complicated. She just didn't know that complicated was my specialty. But to solve a complicated problem, you need information, and information, in the 21st century, means the internet. My tiny home was a technological dead zone. No Wi-Fi, no computer, just a hot plate, a cot, and the thin, particle board walls. I realized, with a sudden cold clarity, that this was a key part of their plan. The isolation wasn't just physical, it was digital. They hadn't just put me out to pasture, they'd cut the phone lines too. They left me with no way to see the outside world, no way to see what they were doing. But they forgot one thing. They forgot that I am from a generation that didn't Google information. We researched it. And for that, there has always been one sacred place. The next morning, I put on my good walking shoes, grabbed my rainy day wallet, and left. I didn't tell them where I was going. I didn't owe them an explanation. I just walked. The walk to the town's public library was 3 miles. I passed the Starbucks where I used to meet my friends, back when I was a real person. I passed the spin studio Chloe went to every morning, the one she'd expense as a business cost. I was invisible on these streets, just another old woman in a windbreaker, and that invisibility, I was learning, was a kind of camouflage. It was a kind of power. The library doors hissed open, and the smell hit me. It's the best smell in the world. It's the smell of old paper, floor wax, and the slightly burnt coffee from the little cafe they'd put in the lobby. It's the smell of possibility, of knowledge. And knowledge, as I well knew, is power. The building was quiet, just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft, rhythmic click-clack of keyboards. A few college kids were hunched over their laptops. A few men I recognized from the bus stop were reading newspapers in the big, comfortable armchairs, just looking for a warm, safe place to be for a few hours. And then there were people like me, the in-betweeners, the ones who still needed a physical place to connect to the digital world. I went to the back, to the public computer terminals. I had to sign in with my library card. A little pop-up window told me I had 60 minutes per session. Fine, I could do this in 60 minutes. My heart was pounding, a strange, nervous energy. This wasn't just browsing, this was a mission. My fingers, stiff with a little arthritis, felt clumsy on the keyboard. But the muscle memory was there. First, I typed in First National Trust. The website loaded. It was glossy, all blue and white, with pictures of smiling, boat-owning families. I found their HELOC page. My eyes scanned the text. Fast cash for your dreams. Leverage your home's equity for. A dream vacation. A new kitchen. That car you've always wanted. My stomach tightened. Not a single word about emergency foundation repair. This was a lifestyle loan. Okay, Margaret, keep going. Next, I typed in the name I had memorized, the one I had written in my ledger. Michael Jenks, loan officer, First National Trust. Bing! There he was, a photo of a man in his late 30s with a smile as slick as his hair. His online profile said his specialty was creative financing and helping families leverage their assets to live the life they deserve. I felt a wave of nausea. I had signed the paper he'd pushed. I had leveraged my asset. But who was living the life they deserved? The bank was a dead end. The bank was just the tool. I needed to see the carpenters. I knew Alex was careful. He was paranoid about his digital footprint, as he called it. But Chloe was a different animal entirely. Chloe was a performer. And a performer needs an audience. I opened a new tab. I typed in Instagram.com. I didn't have an account. Why would I? My life wasn't a performance. But I knew her handle. She'd made a huge embarrassing deal about it at Thanksgiving, demanding everyone follow her so she could get her numbers up. At Chloe Glows. I typed it in. Her profile, of course, was public. How else could the world see her glowing? I clicked, and the world she was building with my money opened up before me. The first photo, my breath caught. It was a picture of her in a yoga pose in my old guest room. It was painted a horrible, bright teal, new white furniture, a new rug, and in the corner, a sleek, black Peloton bike. The caption, "Finally manifested my dream home office, Zen space. It's so important to number self-care and create a life you love. Number girl boss, number home office." My room. They had moved me into a shed, and she had turned my room into a gym. I scrolled, my hands starting to shake. I felt like a spy, like I was seeing something I shouldn't. But it was my life. My money. More selfies. New clothes with the tags still visible. A table full of mimosas at a fancy brunch. The caption, "Celebrating the wins with my girls. Big things are coming." And then I saw it. It wasn't a photo. It was a video. I clicked it. The tinny sound from the cheap library headphones filled my ears. It was Chloe, giggling, using one of those stupid filters with sparkles. She was spinning her phone around inside a car. No, not a car. It was a tank, a massive, gleaming, jet-black Mercedes G-Wagon. The dashboard was all digital screens. The seats were white leather. Her voice high and giddy. "He did it. He really did it. Hubby totally surprised me with an early anniversary present. He said, I deserved an upgrade for dealing with so much stress lately. He's the best. Number blessed. Number G-Wagon. Number new car. Number manifest." I looked at the date. The video had been posted 2 days after I signed the HELOC papers. A cracked foundation. The lie was so enormous, so grotesque, it was breathtaking. They hadn't needed money to fix the house. They were liquidating it. They were selling my life, Mark's life, piece by piece, and driving it around town. I scrolled again, my blood like ice in my veins. My rage was making me precise. Another post, a picture of a framed document. "It's official, guys. Chloe Glows, LLC is live. I'm finally a real business owner. I'm taking on new lifestyle clients, so DM me for rates." LLC, a shell company. A way to move the money. A way to make the theft look like a business investment. I looked at the clock on the computer screen. My 60 minutes were almost up. A little box was flashing. You have 5 minutes remaining. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I, Margaret Henderson, the bookkeeper, sat up straighter in the hard, plastic library chair. The college kid next to me was watching a video game. The man at the end was asleep, his newspaper on his chest. And I was a 60-year-old woman in a public library, uncovering the blueprint for the theft of my entire life. I opened a new tab. I went to the library's print page. I typed in the URL for Michael Jenks's profile. I typed in the web address for Chloe's Instagram. I took a screenshot of the G-Wagon post, a screenshot of the LLC. I hit print. I walked over to the printer, my legs perfectly steady. I slid my library card to pay the 40 cents. The machine whirred, and 4 warm, incriminating pieces of paper slid into the tray. I folded them neatly. I put them in my pocket, right next to my rainy day debit card. They thought I was a harmless old woman. They thought I was a dependent. They'd forgotten. I was the one who always made the numbers work. I walked out of the library, into the bright, unforgiving sunlight. I had my evidence. The real work was about to begin. The 3-mile walk back from the library was the longest of my life. The 4 pieces of paper I'd printed were folded into a neat, sharp square in my pocket. They felt heavy, like a stone. A G-Wagon, a shell company, a lifestyle consultant. I walked past people mowing their lawns, past kids waiting for the school bus. The sun was shining. The world was normal. But I felt like I was in a different dimension. I was a spy. I was a ghost. I was a 60-year-old woman with evidence of a grand theft in her windbreaker pocket. When I got back to the yard, the main house was silent. Chloe's new Mercedes was gone. Alex was probably at the grill, researching a new cut of meat. I slipped into my tiny home and clicked the lock. The sound was small but final. I sat on my cot, the particle board walls seeming to close in. The air was stale. I laid the 4 papers out in a row on the thin mattress. The smiling face of Michael Jenks, the smug pose of Chloe on her Peloton in my room, the gleaming, monstrous G-Wagon, the Chloe Glows LLC announcement. It was a perfect, damning 4-act play of their betrayal. I had the what. I finally, truly understood what they had done. But now, how? My mind, the bookkeeper's mind, started to spin. What's the next step, Marge? The next step, obviously, was a lawyer. A good one. A fraud specialist. I looked at the rainy day debit card on my little table, the one I'd used to pay for my prescription. It had my tiny pension in it, as Chloe called it. It was enough for groceries, for gas, for my little things. It was not enough to hire a lawyer, a retainer for a case like this. It would be thousands, tens of thousands, money I didn't have, money that was right at this moment probably sitting in the leather-wrapped interior of a German SUV. They had thought of everything. They had isolated me, cut me off, and left me just enough to survive, but not enough to fight. I felt a wave of despair so cold, so deep, it almost made me sick. I had the evidence, I had the truth, and it didn't matter. I was a 60-year-old woman in a shed, and they had all the money, all the power, and my own signature on the dotted line. I was beaten. My eyes fell on the leather ledger, still sitting on the table. My weapon. My headquarters. It felt like a mockery now. What good was a book of old numbers against a G-Wagon? I picked it up anyway. It was a comfort. It was the only thing in this tiny room that felt real, that felt solid. I sat on the cot, the 4 printed papers next to me, and I opened the ledger. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just retreating. Back to a time when my world made sense. Back to when I was competent. I ran my fingers over the neat, hand-drawn columns. My own handwriting, 30 years ago. Payroll, suppliers, insurance. The numbers were like old friends. I remembered the late nights, the pots of coffee, the smell of Mark's sawdust and stress. I turned a page, and then another. I landed on 1,995, the year we almost lost it all. My eyes scanned the familiar entries, the tight, careful cursive, and then I saw it, a name that made my breath catch in my throat. Gallo Frank. I hadn't thought of Frank Gallo in 20 years. He was a small-time operator back then, just like Mark, a competitor, a friend, on some days. They were rivals who shared the same frustrations, the same small crews, the same broken-down trucks. My eyes traced the line item. Loan, first backhoe, F. Gallo. $20,000. I remembered it like it was yesterday. The bank had laughed at Mark. We needed a new backhoe to take a bigger job, and we were leveraged to the hilt. Frank Gallo, over a beer, had just written him a personal check. "You're a damn fool, Mark," he'd said. "But you're an honest one." I looked at the paid column, further down the page. My own handwriting, 6 months later, paid in full, principal plus interest, F. Gallo. We'd done it. We'd gotten the job, and I'd scrimped and saved every single penny. I remember driving that final check to Frank's grubby little office myself. But wait, there was another note. Underneath my neat paid in full, there was a scribble. A small blue ink note, in my handwriting. I always made notes. It was a quote. I squinted, bringing the ledger closer to my face. Note, FG, refused interest. Said the $20K was just a handshake. Said, "Marge, you tell that dreamer husband of yours he owes me. Not money, a favor. You guys need anything ever you call me. FG. Frank Gallo." I put the ledger down, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't the Frank Gallo of 1995. This wasn't the guy in the grubby office. This was Gallo Development, the man who had built half of downtown, the name that was on the side of the new stadium, the man who owned skyscrapers, not backhoes. He was a titan. And according to my own ledger, written in my own hand, he owed me a favor. A 30-year-old handshake deal. A promise. From an old world, a world where your word was your bond. A world that Chloe and Alex, with their shell companies and their Instagram lies, wouldn't even recognize. But how? How do you just call a titan? I stood up. I went back to the cardboard box, the one marked Mark Office. I dug past the dried-up pens, past the heavy stapler, and there at the bottom was my old black Rolodex. My fingers were trembling now, but not from fear, from something else. I flipped the stiff, cardboard cards, the plastic sleeves crackling, a BC. G. The card was yellowed with age. The ink was faded. A small, pixelated logo of a backhoe was in the corner. Gallo Construction Incorporated, Frank Gallo, President. And a phone number. A local 7-digit number. It was insane. This was a prayer, not a plan. A 30-year-old number from a Rolodex? A handshake favor from a man who was now a billionaire? I looked at the photo of the G-Wagon, shining with new dirty money. I looked at the faded 30-year-old business card, built on old, honest debt. This was the only way. I wasn't going to fight their world of lies with another lie. I was going to fight it with the truth. I was going to fight it with a debt of honor. I picked up my old simple flip phone, the one Chloe had called my dinosaur phone. I opened it. The screen lit up, bright and simple. My fingers, steady now, began to punch in the numbers. I pressed the last digit. My thumb, wrinkled and a little shaky from arthritis, hovered over the green call button. This was insane. I was standing in a 200-square-foot particle board box, about to call a 30-year-old phone number from a faded Rolodex card. A number for a man who was probably, at this very moment, in a high-rise, looking down on the entire city. What was I expecting? That the number even worked? That a billionaire would honor a handshake deal from 1995? It's a pizza parlor now, I thought, or a nail salon, or just nothing. A dead, digital tone. I looked at the 4 pieces of paper I'd printed at the library, laid out on my cot like a hand of cards, the smug face of the loan officer, the gleaming black G-Wagon, the Chloe Glows, LLC. They were real. This was real. What did I have left to lose? My dignity? Chloe had already ripped that to shreds at Costco. My home? Alex and Chloe were liquidating it one car payment at a time. I took a deep breath. I pressed the green button. I lifted the small plastic flip phone to my ear. The dinosaur phone, Chloe had called it. It felt small and light, like a child's toy. 1 second of silence. Beep. The sound of a ring. Not a, "this number is no longer in service" recording. A ring. My heart didn't just pound. It lurched. It was a real number. Beep. It rang a second time. My mouth was dry. Beep. A third. "Hang up, Marge," a voice in my head screamed. "Hang up right now. This is crazy. You're a fool. He's not going to remember you. People don't honor handshake deals anymore. This isn't Mark's world. This is Chloe's world. All gloss and lies." Beep. I was pulling the phone away, my face burning with a sudden, hot embarrassment. I was a crazy old woman in a shed. And then, a click. A voice. Not a person. A voice. It was crisp, cold, and so professionally sharp it could cut glass. "Gallo Development, Executive Office. How may I direct your call?" Gallo Development. Not Gallo Construction. Not the grubby little office I remembered. I'd just rung the doorbell of the castle. My throat closed. I suddenly felt exactly what they wanted me to be, a stupid, invisible old woman. "Hello," the voice said, impatient. Click, click, click. I could hear her typing. I was an interruption, a fly on the window. "Hello," I managed. My voice sounded thin, reedy, like a dry leaf. I would like to speak to Mr. Frank Gallo, please." A short, dry puff of air came through the line. It might have been a laugh. "I'm sorry, Mr. Gallo does not take unsolicited calls. If you are a vendor, you'll need to submit an RFP to our procurement department. If this is a residential query, I can transfer you to sales." She was already putting me in a box. She was already dismissing me. "No," I said, a little stronger. "This is not a sales call. It's a personal matter. Mr. Gallo's personal matters are scheduled by his executive assistant, who is also not available. I can take a message." This was the wall. The brushed steel, 50-story wall. This was the gatekeeper, designed to filter out people exactly like me. Chloe would know how to handle this. She would lie. She would charm. She would bully. I only had the truth, and the truth, even to my own ears, sounded pathetic. "Ma'am," the voice said again, "I have calls holding. Think, Marge. Think like the bookkeeper. What's the asset?" My eyes landed on the ledger. "The asset isn't the money. The asset is the history." "My name," I said. My voice changed. The thin, reedy sound was gone. This was the 3 a.m. I will make the numbers work voice. "My name is Margaret Henderson. And my husband was Mark Henderson, of Henderson Construction." Click, click, click. The typing stopped. "I'm not seeing that name in our system, Mrs. Henderson." Her voice was still cold. "You won't." I cut her off. "The name you're looking for isn't in your computer. The name you need is Gallo and Sons Construction, 1995. Silence. "You tell him," I said, my voice as steady as the numbers in my ledger. "That Mark's wife is calling. Tell him I am calling in the favor. The one about the backhoe." Dead. Silence. I could hear her processing the words. Backhoe. It was a nonsense word to her. A word from the dirt, and she was in the sky. She was probably convinced I was a lunatic, a dependent with dementia, just like Chloe thought. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2, 10. I'd failed. I made a fool of myself. I was about to hang up. Then, the voice. It was completely different. The ice was gone. It was hesitant. Please hold, Mrs. Henderson." "Mrs. Henderson." "Not ma'am." I was on hold. The phone clicked. But it wasn't the chirpy, awful elevator music of a normal hold. It was just silence. A deadline. Did she hang up on me? Did she just mute me while she and another assistant had a good laugh? You will not believe the call I just got. I stood in the shed, staring at the particle board wall, my flip phone getting sweaty in my palm. The tiny, blinking light on the phone seemed to be mocking me. And then, a sound. A boom on the line, like someone grabbing a heavy, old-fashioned receiver off its cradle. A voice, gravelly, like rocks in a tumbler, exploded in my ear. "Marge." I physically flinched, pulling the phone away. The voice was so loud it hurt. "Marge, is that you? Margaret Henderson." I brought the phone back, my hand shaking. "Frank." "Holy!" He let loose a string of curses that would have made Mark blush. My God, Marge, it's been... What? 10 years since the funeral? I stayed in the back. I didn't want to. His voice, the booming cannon, softened, just for a second. Jesus, Marge, a backhoe. You're calling about the backhoe. I couldn't speak. I was crying. The tears were hot and silent. I wasn't sobbing. I was just leaking. The humiliation, the fear, the anger, the injustice of the last 3 months. It was all pouring out. Marge, you there? Are you okay? Is Alex okay? Is the kid okay? Alex. Alex is the problem, Frank. I said it, and the words just hung in the air. The line was silent again. But this time, it was a different silence. It was a heavy one. A listening one. Go ahead, Frank said, and his voice was no longer a boom. It was quiet. It was the voice of the man who wrote the check in the bar all those years ago. Talk to me. What did the kid do? So I talked. I stood in my 200-square-foot prison, and I gave him the numbers. I told him about the tiny home, the Costco receipt, the cracked foundation, the HELOC, the smiling Mr. Jenks, and then I told him about the G-Wagon and the LLC. I didn't whine. I didn't cry. I was the bookkeeper. I was just reading the ledger of my own betrayal. When I was done, the silence on the other end was so profound, I thought the call might have dropped. Frank, I'm here. I heard him inhale, a long, sharp sound through his teeth. That punk. More curses, aimed at Alex this time. He's not Mark's kid. Mark would never. Mark was a dreamer. Marge, maybe a bad businessman, but he was honest. To the bone. I know, I whispered. So, what do you need? He said. The gravel was back, but it wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed for me. Money? You need money? I'll wire it right now. How much? You name it. This was the moment, the damsel in distress moment. He was offering to fix it. I looked at my ledger. I looked at the printed papers. No, Frank, I said. My voice was steady again. The tears were gone. This isn't my problem to fix. This is their problem to answer for. I took a breath. I don't need a handout. I'm not a dependent. I'm a bookkeeper. I have my evidence. What I need, what I'm calling in the favor for. I need a weapon. A pause. A weapon. I need your lawyer. A beat. And then a sound I haven't heard in years. A deep, genuine, rumbling laugh. It shook the little phone. A lawyer, he chuckled. You don't want a check. You want Barry. Oh, Marge. You always were the smart one. You were too good for Mark, you know that. I need the best one, Frank. I need a shark. You'll get him, he said, and all the laughter was gone. It was all business. Don't you move. Don't you say one word to them. You're not in a shed, Marge. You're in a fortress. I'm sending my best, and he's bringing his teeth. You will hear from him in 1 hour. Click. He was gone. I stood in the silence, the flip phone still pressed to my ear. I lowered it, slowly, and looked at the screen. Call ended. I didn't just find a lawyer. I had activated an ally. I had called in a 30-year-old debt of honor. I looked at the picture of Chloe on her Peloton. I looked at the picture of the G-Wagon. They had built their house of cards using my house. And I had just called in the man who owned the casino. The game was on. And the first rule of the game I knew was silence. Frank Gallo's shark, a man named Barry Varga, called my flip phone exactly 1 hour later. His voice was the opposite of Frank's. It wasn't a boom. It was a quiet, precise click. He didn't sound like a shark. He sounded like a surgeon. He didn't ask me how I felt. He didn't offer sympathy. He asked for the numbers. Mrs. Henderson, he said, his voice clipped and dry. I understand you've been keeping a ledger. For the next 2 days, my life in the tiny home was exactly the same. I made my instant coffee on the hot plate. I read my library books. I swept the dust off the vinyl floor. But in between, my dinosaur phone would ring. It was Varga. The HELOC, he said. The loan officer, Jenks. He's on Gallo's no-fly list. This is sloppy. The G-Wagon, he called to say. They registered it to the LLC, not personally. They're amateurs. Good. Amateurs are easy to hang. I saw the black G-Wagon pull out of the driveway, Chloe at the wheel, looking like she was going to a yoga class. I felt nothing. It wasn't a car anymore. It was an asset. It was evidence. It was a number in the new ledger I had started. On Thursday, Mr. Varga called a final time. "I have your profit and loss statement," he said. I had dictated it to him over the phone, reading from my library printouts and my own meticulous notes. "I've cross-referenced it with the bank's preliminary data. The forensic audit is just a formality, but it's a nice, sharp legal tool. We're ready. The letters will be delivered by certified courier tomorrow morning. I suggest you stay in your residence." "Stay in my shed?" I asked. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, and I swear I could hear a thin reptilian smile in his voice. "That's not a shed. That's the command center. Sit tight. The show is about to begin." It happened on a Friday. Payday. I was sitting outside my tiny home, on the little metal folding chair I'd found in the shed. I was drinking my tea. The sun was warm. For the first time in a long time, I was at peace. At 10:03 a.m., I heard the sound I was waiting for, a car door shutting, a professional. Then, the crunch, crunch, crunch of hard-soled shoes on the gravel path. It was a sound that did not belong in our yard. I heard the rap, rap, rap on the main house door. I waited. I sipped my tea. A minute passed. And then, the sliding glass door of the main house flew open with such force, the bang made me jump. "What is this?" "Chloe." Her voice wasn't a coo. It wasn't a chirp. It was a shriek, a sound I had never heard from her, the sound of pure, undiluted panic. "Calm down," I heard Alex mumble. It's just a letter." "A letter?" "A letter, Alex. This is from a law firm. Gallo Development." "Who the hell is Gallo Development?" I don't know," Alex said, his voice rising. Then I heard the sound of paper being ripped. A frantic, tearing sound. What? Notice of. Immediate forensic audit. Chloe's voice was getting higher, cracking. "What does that mean?" It says, pending review of. Fraudulent conveyance." Alex was reading. "Read it, Alex." "What does it say?" "Intent to file. Internal Revenue Service. IRS." Chloe's voice was now a whisper of horror. "IRS? Why?" And then, the payload. Alex. Account 788B. Frozen. "What?" "Let me see that." "Frozen, Alex, what does frozen mean?" I heard a phone. The click, click, click of Chloe frantically typing her password. A pause. It's not working," she breathed. My app. The bank app. It's not working. Alex, my card. My business card." Another pause. "Alex, my card is not working. They. It's not working. They froze everything." The sound of something glass shattering on the patio. A cup? A wine glass? And then, silence. A dead, heavy, sick silence that lasted for 10 seconds. And I knew, in that second, exactly where they would look next. The sliding glass door banged open again. Not a slide. A bang. Footsteps. Running. On the grass. Pound, pound, pound. The thin, particle-board door of my tiny home shuddered in its frame. "Open this door." It was Alex. His voice was a guttural roar I didn't recognize. Pound, pound, pound. "You!" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. "You old woman! You did this!" I was still holding my teacup. My hand was perfectly steady. I set the cup down on the metal folding chair. I stood up. I smoothed my blouse. And I unlocked the door. I opened it. They stood there, like two wild animals. Chloe's face was a mottled white mask of rage and tears. Her hair was coming undone. Alex was holding the thick, creamy, expensive-looking letter from Varga's law firm. His knuckles were white. "What did you do?" Alex breathed. He was shaking. "Gallo Development," Chloe spat, her eyes darting around my tiny, clean room, as if looking for a hidden computer, a secret fax machine. "How do you even know that name?" I didn't answer. I just turned, walked the 2 steps to my cot, and picked up my weapon. I held it out. The old, green, leather-bound ledger. They stared at it. It was a foreign object to them, an artifact from a dead civilization. "Gallo and Sons Construction," I said, my voice perfectly calm in the morning air. 1,995. A handshake deal about a backhoe. their faces. It was like I was speaking Greek. The confusion was total. It was the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. What? What are you talking about? Alex stammered. A backhoe? Are you senile? No, I said. I'm a bookkeeper. And then I reached back to the cot and picked up my other ledger. The new one. The one with the printouts from the library stapled to the back. I didn't give it to them. I just held up the top sheet, the profit and loss I had dictated to Mr. Varga. Column A, I said, my voice clear. Money in, my pension, my Social Security, the HELOC for an alleged cracked foundation. Total, $150,000. Alex flinched. Column B, I continued, money out, Mercedes G-Wagon registered to Chloe Glows LLC, $130,000, Chloe Glows LLC. Initial investment, $20,000. Chloe made a sound, a small, strangled gasp. Peloton bike, $2,400. New patio furniture, $3,000. New grill. Stop, Alex whispered. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his wife. A G-Wagon. It was a business expense, Chloe shrieked, lunging, not at me, but at him. It's for my brand, you said. I keep the books, I said, my voice cutting through her shriek. It's what I do. Alex looked from the paper to Chloe, and in his eyes, I saw the real foundation finally crack. He hadn't known. Not about the G-Wagon. He hadn't known the scale of it. He was a fool. But she was a predator. You told me it was a lease, he whispered to her. You old. Chloe turned on me, her face a mask of pure, ugly hate. She lunged, her hands like claws, trying to grab the papers. I didn't move. But Alex did. He grabbed her wrist. Stop. Just stop. He was looking at the ledger in my hand, and for the first time he saw me, not his dependent mother. He saw the person who had just, with a 30-year-old book and a flip phone, dismantled his entire life. He let go of his wife. He stood there, defeated, a 30-year-old man in a ruined kingdom, holding a letter from a lawyer he couldn't afford. I took one step back, into my tiny home, and I closed the door. I closed the door, and the click of the cheap lock was the loudest sound in the world. Through the thin particle board, I could hear them. The fight didn't explode. It imploded. I heard a low, hissing sound. It was Alex. A G-Wagon? Chloe? A G-Wagon. And her voice, not a shriek now, but a desperate, cornered animal snarl. It was a write-off. You said we deserved. You said. I said a lease. I thought, oh my God, Chloe. The IRS. You're blaming me? You're the one who... I stopped listening. I didn't want to hear it. It was the sound of rats in a bag. I went to my tiny hot plate. I measured out the instant coffee. I boiled the water. I was the bookkeeper. The audit was complete. I had presented my findings. The rest was just the messy, human fallout. And I was, for the first time in my life, completely uninterested in cleaning up my son's mess. The next few days were quiet. Deadly quiet. I saw them, sometimes, through my small window. They were always on their phones, pacing the patio, but they weren't talking to each other. They were in separate corners, two shipwrecked sailors on the same tiny island, both trying to find a signal. The black G-Wagon sat in the driveway, motionless. It was no longer a symbol of their success. It was a 5,000-pound, $130,000 piece of evidence, and they didn't dare touch it. And then, on Tuesday, the other shoe dropped. I was reading my library book when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong, a heavy diesel engine, idling, the squeal of hydraulics. And then, the insistent, annoying beep, beep, beep of a truck backing up. I went to my window. It wasn't a construction truck, it was a tow truck, a big, greasy, flatbed repo truck, and it was backing right up to the G-Wagon. The driver, a big man in a stained reflective vest, got out. He didn't knock on the house door. He just got out with his clipboard, checked the VIN number, and started unloading the chains. He was all business. The front door of the main house flew open. Chloe. She didn't have shoes on. She was wearing a silk bathrobe, the one I'm sure she expensed for her brand. Her hair was wild. Stop! Hey, what are you doing? You can't! Stop! That's my car. The driver didn't even look at her. He just kept working the chain. Ma'am, he said, his voice a bored, gravelly monotone, is your name on the title? It's my LLC. It's a business vehicle. The driver sighed. He stopped. He pulled a thick, folded piece of paper from his back pocket. Ma'am, the bank says it's their vehicle. The account's been frozen for 72 hours. The payments are in default. I've got a job to do. Now, please step back. I don't want to accidentally. Alex, get out here. He's stealing the car. Alex came out, but he was slow. He was already defeated. He was just a pale, thin man in a wrinkled t-shirt. He saw the truck. He saw the driver. He saw the paper. And he just stopped. He put his hands on his head. Chloe, he whispered, just come inside. It's gone. No, she shrieked, but it was a desperate, ugly sound. And then the real humiliation began. Mrs. Jensen, from 2 doors down, was walking her poodle, which meant she was standing on the sidewalk, holding her phone up, filming the entire thing. Chloe saw her. She saw the phone. The shame that washed over her face was so profound it was almost pathetic. Her rage, her entitlement, it all just collapsed. She wasn't a girl boss anymore. She was just a woman in a bathrobe, being filmed, having her car repossessed on a Tuesday morning. She turned and ran back into the house. The door slammed. The tow truck driver shook his head, hitched the last chain, and with a terrible groan of metal, the $130,000 G-Wagon was dragged onto the flatbed. It looked like a dead, shiny beetle. I watched it drive away. $130,000. Gone. The ledger was balancing. But the real show was that Saturday. I woke up at 7 a.m. to the sound of scraping. Not a truck. The sound of furniture being dragged across a patio. I looked out my window. They were having a yard sale. It wasn't a clearing out some old stuff yard sale. It was a sell your soul for gas money yard sale. They were hauling everything out. The new wicker patio furniture, the second smoker grill, the high-tech kitchen stools, the teal rug from my old room, and God help me, the Peloton. They had dragged the Peloton out onto the dead grass, its black screen staring blankly at the sky. Chloe was unrecognizable. She was in old sweatpants, her hair scraped back into a greasy bun, no makeup. She was sitting on the curb, next to a piece of cardboard with "sale" scrawled in a desperate-looking Sharpie. Alex was the one doing the work. He looked hollow. He was haggling with a man in a pickup truck over the price of the patio chairs. I paid $2,000 for this set," I heard Alex mutter. The man kicked one of the cushions. "I'll give you $100 for all of it." $100. Take it or leave it, kid. It's used. Alex. He took it. He took the crumpled bills and stuffed them in his pocket, his face pale and sick. People were swarming, the vultures of the neighborhood, the ones who get up at dawn for a bargain. They were picking through my life, through their stolen life. They were picking up the new lamps, the designer knockoff pillows, the high-end blenders. They were touching everything, looking at the price tags, and scoffing. They were liquidating. They were selling the house, piece by piece, for pennies on the dollar just to get cash. Cash for what? For groceries? For the interest on the HELOC Mr. Varga had frozen? I watched the girl boss and the man of the house sell their manifested life on the front lawn. Then the final, perfect, brutal punctuation. A white Range Rover, just as shiny as the G-Wagon had been, pulled up. It didn't park. It just idled. The window, tinted dark, glided down. It was one of Chloe's friends, the one from the BBQ, the one who had admired her stress-free life. She wasn't getting out. She was just looking. Her eyes scanned the scene, the desperate yard sale, the empty spot in the driveway where the G-Wagon used to be, the Peloton on the grass, the hollowed-out look on Alex's face, the greasy, defeated woman on the curb who was, just last week, at Chloe Glow's. Chloe looked up. Their eyes met. The friend didn't say a word. She didn't wave. She didn't offer to help. She just saw. And with the slow, silent hum of an electric motor, the tinted window glided back up. The Range Rover put on its blinker, pulled away, and was gone. That, I knew, was the real repossession. The financial ruin was one thing, but the social death? That was final. I turned away from the window. I went back to my cot. I picked up my real ledger, the old, green, leather-bound one. I opened it, not to a page of numbers, but just to hold it, to feel the weight of something built, not bought, something earned, not stolen. The show outside was over. The assets were liquidated. The books were, for now, balanced. The yard sale was a public funeral, and the vultures had picked the bones clean. When the last car drove off and Alex was left standing on the lawn with a handful of crumpled $20 bills, a silence fell over the house. It was a new kind of quiet, not the peaceful quiet I had in my tiny home. It was the dead, hollow quiet of a tomb, the silence of a life that had been, in the space of one morning, fully liquidated. For 2 days I heard nothing. The main house was a mausoleum. The black G-Wagon was gone. The patio was empty. Chloe's influencer friends, I noted, were no longer driving by. The performance was over, and the audience had gone home. The knock came on the third night. It was late, past 11. The sound was so different from the last time, I almost didn't recognize it. It wasn't the frantic, enraged poundp, pound of an animal. It was a tap, tap, tap. A small, hesitant, almost ashamed sound. I put down my library book. The rain was starting, a light patter on the cheap roof. I opened the door. He was just standing there. Alex, my son. He looked 10 years older than he had at the BBQ. He was soaked. The thin, useless windbreaker he was wearing was plastered to his skin, and he was shaking, but I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or from something else. He wasn't the man of the house anymore. He was just a boy, caught in the rain, looking utterly and completely lost. "Can I?" He motioned inside, his voice a hoarse whisper. I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and let him into my 200 square foot life. He dripped onto the cheap vinyl floor, the puddles spreading around his old, broken sneakers. He looked around, really seeing it for the first time. He looked at my single cot, my hot plate, my neat stack of paperbacks, and the old, leather-bound ledger sitting on my tiny dinette table. He was finally, truly, seeing the pasture he had put me in. "It's small," he whispered, as if he'd just realized it. "I manage," I said. I didn't offer him a chair. There was only one. I sat on the edge of my cot, my hands folded. He just stood there, the sound of the rain on the roof filling the silence. He was the first to break. You ruined us," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a question. He was holding the words, testing them, trying to see if they were true. "No, Alex," I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through the sound of the rain. "You were already ruined. I just balanced the books." He shook his head, a gesture of deep, profound confusion. "Why?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why would you? Mom, you called Frank Gallo." He said the name like it was a myth, a ghost story. He owns the stadium. He's not a person. He's a corporation. "Why would he even talk to you?" "He's an old friend," I said. "He's a man who honors his debts. It's a concept." "But to do this," Alex's hands clenched at his sides, "to destroy us? For revenge? Because we put you out here." Revenge. It was such a small, ugly word. It was Chloe's word. I didn't answer him. I just reached for my spiral-bound notebook, the new ledger, the one I'd started the day my card was declined at the CVS. I opened it. It was resting on top of the old 1995 Gallo & Sons ledger, the two books sitting side by side. The history of my life, one built on honor, the other built on lies. I turned to a fresh page I had prepared. "This," I said, "is why." He leaned in, squinting in the dim light of my single reading lamp. He looked at the page. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't a list of my feelings. It was just numbers. My neat, clear, bookkeeper's cursive. 2 columns, separated by a red line I had drawn with a ruler. What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Another one of your books." "This is the ledger," I said. "The one you and Chloe started. I just finished it for you." I ran my finger down the first column. Column A, our money in, the money you had to spend, my Social Security, which you took, $1,200 a month. My widow's pension, which you also took, $800 a month. And the big one, the home equity line of credit, taken out under the lie of a cracked foundation, $150,000. I tapped the bottom of the column. Total assets you had to burn, $152,000, plus my guest room, plus my dignity. He was breathing too fast. He was reading it. He was finally, truly reading it. And column B, I said. My voice was as calm and steady as the rain. Your money out. My finger moved to the other side of the red line. Mercedes G-Wagon, registered to Chloe Glows, LLC. Purchased 2 days after the HELOC was funded, $130,000. Alex made a small sound, a gasp, like he'd been punched in the gut. He physically staggered back, his hand flying to his mouth. You knew, he whispered, his eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. I thought it was a lease, a business lease. She told me. I keep the books, Alex, I said, cutting him off. It's what I do. My finger kept moving down the page. He couldn't look away. Initial investment to fund the LLC, which as of this morning has 0 clients and 0 income, $20,000. Peloton bike, installed in my old room, $2,400. New patio furniture, wicker, which you sold for $100, $3,000. New smoker grill, $800. Catering for networking barbecue, where I was the help, $1,200. Chloe's self-care day brunch posted on Instagram, $600. I stopped. I lifted the pen. I tapped the final, damning total at the bottom of column B. Total spent. In 6 weeks, $157,400. I looked up at him. You were already $5,400 in the hole, Alex. You were spending my life, and you hadn't even hit the bottom yet. You were just looking for the next thing to sell. He sank. He didn't sit. He sank onto the little metal folding chair by the door, his head in his hands. He wasn't crying. He was just gone. The man who had stormed my door was gone. The boy who had bragged at the BBQ was gone. All that was left was this. Shell. She spent it all, he whispered into his hands. It wasn't a question, it was a realization. She spent it all. She spent it, I confirmed. And you let her. You were so desperate to not be your father's son, so desperate to look successful. You let her sell the very foundation he built for you. He looked up at me, and his eyes were raw. Dad's business failed. He was a failure. We were poor. Chloe. She just wanted us to be seen. The rage that hit me was so cold and sudden, it almost took my breath away. Your father's business did not fail, I said, and my voice was steel. He died, and I, the dependent, in the backyard. I kept it from failing. I balanced those books. I slapped the old Gallo ledger. I kept this house. I kept you. I worked for 30 years so that you would have a foundation to stand on. I stood up. I pointed from the new ledger to him. The foundation wasn't cracked, Alex. Not the one Mark and I built. You, and your wife. You were the crack. You were the lie. You were the thing that was rotten. He just nodded. He couldn't speak. He understood. The numbers didn't lie. He stood up, slowly, like an old man. Mom, he said, his voice thick. What do I do? What do I do? I looked at him. The boy I'd raised. The man he'd become. The mess he had made. That, I said, closing the spiral-bound notebook with a soft thud, is no longer my ledger to balance. You're a grown man, Alex. It's time you learn to keep your own books. He stood at the door for a second. Then he opened it and walked out into the rain. He didn't go to the main house. He didn't go to Chloe. He walked to his own, beaten-up, 10-year-old sedan, the one he'd had since college, the one he always parked on the street because he was embarrassed by it. He got in, started the engine, and just drove away. I watched his taillights disappear. I turned and looked at the muddy puddle he'd left on my floor. I got a paper towel, and I cleaned it up. I cleaned the last streak of mud from the vinyl floor. It was a simple act, but it felt final. It was the last time I would ever clean up a mess Alex had made. After he drove away that night, the main house went dark. 2 days later, a rideshare, a simple, anonymous sedan, pulled up. Chloe came out. She wasn't carrying a designer handbag. She was carrying a single, overstuffed duffel bag. She didn't look at my tiny home. She didn't look at the empty driveway. She got in the car, and just like that, at Chloe Glow's was gone. The house, my house, was silent. Mr. Varga, Frank Gallo's lawyer, was a surgeon, just as I'd thought. He was also a sledgehammer. He'd convinced the bank that their loan officer, Mr. Jenks, had engaged in predatory lending against an elder, and that Frank Gallo's legal team was prepared to make that very public. The bank, terrified, settled. The HELOC was nullified. Mr. Varga also convinced Alex to sign a quitclaim deed. The house was mine. 100%, free and clear. That was 6 months ago. Today, I'm sitting at the kitchen island, the one Chloe bought with my money. I kept it. It's a good, solid island. The sun is streaming in. The backyard is just grass. I sold the tiny home to a scrap dealer for $500. My roses are already starting to grow back. The front door opens. I don't look up. I'm not startled. "Hey, Mom." It's Alex. He's wearing the dark brown uniform of a package delivery driver. He looks tired. He's thinner, but his eyes are clear for the first time in years. He's not living here. He's living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment across town, the kind of place he can afford, not the kind of place he can manifest. He sits down across from me, and he puts his own crumpled papers on the island. A pay stub, a power bill, a credit card statement, with an interest rate that makes me wince. I brought the statements," he says. "Good," I say. I slide a simple, spiral-bound notebook and a pen toward him, the $2 kind you get at CVS. "Let's see them." He opens the notebook. "He's been doing this for 2 months now. He's learning." "Column A," he says, his voice low. "Paycheck, $812. Column B," I prompt. "Rent, $1,400. He stops. He looks at the numbers. I'm short, Mom. Again. I don't get how you and Dad did it. It's impossible. It's all just debt." I look at my son, the man who wanted to be a girl boss, who wanted to be seen, and who is now, for the first time, seeing the truth. I put my hand over his. "It's just numbers, Alex. You don't hack them. You don't manifest them. You face them. One line at a time. Now, what's next? Your car insurance." He nods. He picks up the pen. He's learning. He leaves an hour later. I'm alone in my quiet, beautiful house. I walk into my old room, the one Chloe had turned into her Zen space. I kept the Peloton. It's good for my knees. On the bookshelf, where it belongs, is the old green Gallo and Sons ledger. It's not a weapon anymore. It's a reminder. They thought I was a dependent. They thought I was a relic. They forgot that the person who counts the money, the person who sees the numbers, that's the person who has the real power. I reclaimed my life, not with a magic wand, but with a ledger. I learned that true independence isn't about what you show on Instagram. It's about knowing exactly what you're worth and what things cost, down to the very last penny. So let me ask you, if your life's work was threatened, if the very foundation of what you built was being sold off, would you have the courage to open the book and fight for it? If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the hardest of times.